Hi, and welcome to another episode of Sports Talk. As always, I'm Mirza here with my brother Mustafa. We're going to be discussing a topic today about boxing versus MMA. A topic maybe a lot of you guys have been having discussions on lately because of all these freak show boxing events.
Let's not call it freak show boxing. It's actually very entertaining. I'm really starting to love these MMA versus boxers.
No, definitely. I'm not calling it in a bad way. I look forward to these boxing matches more than most boxing matches. Maybe not a Canelo fight or a Tyson Fury fight or, one of the heavyweights, Anthony Joshua or Deontay Wilder, but I definitely look forward to it more than anyone else's fight.
Okay, so I'm just going to break down what we're going to talk about today. Like he said, boxing versus MMA. We're going to say, is that good for the sport of MMA? Is that good for the sport of boxing? We're going to discuss the latest matchups that happened. Anderson versus Tito and Vitor versus Holyfield. Was that good? Should they allow a 60-year-old man to fight? Almost 60-year-old man to fight? We're going to discuss Dana White not allowing all his UFC fighters to go fight in boxing. And just those variety of topics related to this boxing versus MMA. But first and foremost, TRT Vitor. Come on, man. How are you celebrating after beating a 58-year-old man who hasn't boxed in probably like 20 years?
Definitely, that fight, that was criminal. That was criminal. The owners of Triller and Vitor should be charged for assault. Because, first of all, no one should allow Evander Holyfield to fight. That's why only the Florida Athletic Commission allowed him to fight. The Nevada Athletic Commission didn't allow him to fight, and they knew why. He's a great boxer, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, but 58 years old, after taking a punishment throughout his career as well. And then on top of that, you're not going to test Vitor? I mean, we know Vitor's on some serious TRT.
That's what I was just going to cut you off and say. Vitor Belfort has been on steroids. This is nothing new. You don't even have to test him. You can see it. Your pitchers can tell all when you see Vitor. If you see Vitor saggy, that means he's off them steroids. If you see Vitor not saggy, how is he bigger now than he is before? At 40-something, however old Vitor is, how is he bigger now?
Hold on, before you say anything, let's just stick to Vitor right now, okay? Vitor Belfort should be banned from all sporting events related to combat sports. It's like Mike Tyson said, you take PEDs in other sports as one thing, but you take it in a fighting sport, in a combat sport, where you can literally kill your opponent. You can literally kill your opponent, and it's a huge advantage, not a little advantage. Don't give me that him taking testosterone replacement therapy or growth hormones or any other PED is not a huge advantage. It's a massive advantage, especially at his age and how many years he's been fighting. It gives him the recovery that he needs, and he's way bigger than he would ever be without it. And you can see the difference, as you said. You see him saggy.
And one thing I had to say before I forget. The Triller owner or whoever announced that $30-40 million offer to fight Jake Paul, how are you going to be so unprofessional? He's in there swearing, yelling,
drunk.
Yeah, not knowing what he's talking about. And you're the owner or you're the head guy that makes the matchups or whatever you are. That's ridiculous. That's why Triller's got to be a bit more professional in that sense. And
sorry to cut you off, but that's why I enjoyed Jake Paul's last fight not on Triller.
Yeah,
I'm happy he left Triller.
More professional.
If he wants to be taken professionally, that was the first big step he needed to take, and I'm glad he did it.
So now let's switch over to something more positive, because everyone knows Vitor is on. Everyone knows TRT Vitor. That's a common. Everyone knows that. That's a new name. It's not Vitor Belfort. It's TRT Vitor. Okay, we'll leave that aside. He was a great champion in his own way if you count steroids. If you don't count steroids, then he's not what you think he is. But let's switch over to Anderson versus Tito Ortiz. Wow, Anderson, man. I knew he was going to win.
Everyone knew he was going to win.
I don't know why they allowed Tito Ortiz to fight. Tito Ortiz is garbage. Like, I don't want to be disrespectful to him. He's great. He was great in MMA in his prime. Because he could wrestle, grapple. He's never been a boxer. I'm talking about he's garbage in boxing.
It's a sad day when Dana White's like the only MMA fighter I would box is Tito Ortiz. Because come on, let's face it, Dana can't box either.
Yeah, because Tito Ortiz can't box when he was in his prime. How's he gonna box now against one of the best strikers who just beat Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.? He just beat a professional boxer at the age of 46.
No,
Shout out to Anderson the GOAT.
and yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And because I brought up Dana, he also brought up a good point where he said we're gonna have to start discussing if Anderson Silva is the GOAT of combat sports, and I think he is. I personally think he is. Who is so? He is potentially the greatest MMA fighter of all time. On top of that, he's beaten a world-class boxer like Julio Chavez Jr. And to compete at both sports at a high level, at the highest level in MMA and a high level now as well. I mean, I would love to see the future. I'd love to see who he fights next. I do believe, like what Dana White said, I don't think Jake Paul's going to fight Anderson Silva. Although I would love to see that fight. Him versus any of the Paul brothers, whether it's Jake or Logan Paul. I would love to see that fight. I hope it happens, but I don't think it's going to happen.
I think Anderson, especially because he's not in his prime, if he took boxing in his prime, you never know. He could have been the best boxer maybe. Because he's doing it at the age of 46, beat a world champion. But I think Anderson needs not to downgrade his competition after. Like, he needs to, I think, fight someone better than Tito Ortiz. And I think that's what he's going to do next. And what we need to get to is, what do you think this is good for the sport of boxing and MMA? Because I do. I think it brings more eyes to boxing. It brings the MMA community to watch boxing. And it brings the boxing community to tune into MMA fights. So I think it's good.
Well, I don't know if it's good. Well, it's definitely good for the MMA community, in my opinion. Because especially what it will do, I think, eventually, is it will give a reason for the UFC to raise fighters' pay. Because a lot of fighters are going to want to leave and do these type of fights where they can make more money. So I think overall it is good for the fighters. And I think overall it will still end up being good for the UFC. Because even if MMA fighters win or lose to Jake Paul or anyone else who's not a professional boxer, what it does is bring more eyes to the sport. Because you start searching up, okay, like, who was Ben Askren? Who is Tyron Woodley? You start watching their old fights. And as far as MMA is, it's a completely different sport than boxing. So when you start tuning in from boxing to MMA, it's a different sport. You can't compare the two. So I think for the MMA community, it brings more eyes, it brings more viewership, and overall is better. But for the boxing community, I would have to disagree. I think it's the worst thing to happen to boxing. And I think it's going to hurt boxing in the long run.
I don't think so, because boxing doesn't have many superstars anymore. You gotta understand that Terrence Crawford, right? It might be the pound for pound best fighter in the world. He's not a pay-per-view draw. And he's considered your best fighter. Earl Spence is not a pay-per-view draw. Manny Pacquiao is practically retired. They only have Canelo Alvarez and then the heavyweight division where the three of them, Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, and Deontay Wilder. And that's only if they probably fight each other nowadays.
Yeah, that's true. No,
So not
that's
many
definitely
big superstars. Even I think UFC might have more bigger superstars than boxing.
I agree with you. And as far as you brought up Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, I think Deontay Wilder loses one more time to Tyson Fury. His superstardom's done.
Yeah.
He's not going to be a draw at all anymore.
Yeah, that's true. But so I think it's good for both sports, and I like to see it.
But
I like to see it.
That's why I'm going to stop you. Like I said, I don't think it's good for boxing because it brings more eyes to the sport of boxing, but does it really?
Yeah,
Because
it does.
no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Because now what you have is people tuning in out of a boxing fight because they have an other boxing fight to watch. That's not an actual boxing fight.
It's an actual boxing fight.
No, man, you're not getting it. Like, listen, serious boxing fans are watching the actual boxing fights.
Yeah, but they're still tuning in for this. They're still tuning in for these fights. They're going to put them on different days.
I agree, but what's happening is the new eyes, like Jake Paul said, he's bringing new kids to the boxing world. They maybe tune into boxing. They maybe watch it because of him. But I think overall it'll hurt the sport because what it's showing is the lack of superstars in boxing. And every sport, every league needs a superstar.
No.
And sadly, other than Canelo Alvarez and 3 heavyweights, the biggest superstar of boxing is Jake Paul.
Well, it's not sad.
It's not sad. I don't mean it in a negative way.
Give some respect.
I don't mean it in a negative way for him. He's doing a great job and he's doing the right
I'm
thing.
going to cut you off right now. I'm tired of hearing this. It's definitely good for the sport of boxing because this is what you not understand. The serious fans, boxing fans, that know the in and outs of boxing are not always going to tune in for these type of fights. But you don't need those people to tune in for these fights. What Jake Paul and Logan Paul are bringing is a YouTube community of over like 20 plus million subscribers for Jake Paul. Probably the same for Logan Paul. They're bringing more views just by 2 of them. And now they have this YouTube versus TikTok stuff too. Those people have millions and millions of followers. More than these boxing people.
No.
So they're bringing those people to watch boxing fights.
Yeah, no, but no. I'm going to have to disagree with you completely. He is bringing eyes to the sport of boxing, but not to the actual sport, the actual athletes. These kids aren't tuning in to watch Terence Crawford, Errol Spence Jr. They're not tuning in for that.
They might after. They might start liking the sport. How do you know?
I think what's happening is because the hype of these sports, a lot of the fans of boxing are going to end up tuning into these fights more than those fights. Because you can tell by the pay-per-view buys too. That a lot more people are more interested in a Jake Paul fight. And I'm going to tell you the honest truth. I'm a fan of boxing. But if it's not a huge fight in boxing, even Terence Crawford, Errol Spence, I'm looking more forward, sadly, to a Jake Paul, Tyron Woodley type of fight.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying a lot of people. But there's a lot of haters out there that's saying, it's not good for the sport of boxing. And I'm not gonna watch it, but you know they're watching it.
No, I'm not saying I'm not gonna watch. I'm telling you, I'm a fan of boxing, but I'm looking more forward to that fight. The only fight in boxing I'm looking more forward to than a Jake Paul fight, sadly, is the Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder fight. That's it. Pacquiao's done now. There's no Floyd, there's Canelo, but who's his competition? Who's he fighting next? I don't even know.
Alright, so you're just gonna disagree and say it's whatever, that's your opinion. My opinion is good for MMA and it's good for boxing. It's good for everyone. It might not be the best for specifically the UFC. MMA is more than the UFC because a lot of the fighters are gonna want to leave UFC because they're going to get paid way more fighting these YouTube stars.
Or UFC can do the right thing and start paying their fighters more and still have the same fighters stay and still have hype around their brand and still have the viewership. All they need to do and what they should have done is pay the fighters more.
Yeah, or they could do that, but I don't think that's going to happen. So that's it for our discussion today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. MMA versus boxing. Do you guys like this MMA versus boxing events, or do you guys just like to watch specific sports like just boxing alone, like actual boxing, or actual MMA like a UFC fight? Let us know what you guys think, and we'll see you next time. Take care, stay safe, stay healthy, and this has been Sports Talk from 2 Canucks up north.